of 2017, just most recently elected this last November. The board asked me to talk to you guys about taxation and how the property taxes affect the Adamus board and your particular levies. So I put together a little PowerPoint here. We'll go over those things with you guys. But at any point, if you have any questions or something isn't quite clear, or maybe I didn't explain it correctly, just let me know, raise your hand. We'll keep it very informal going from there. So here we are, just talking about taxation anyway, from the Department of Taxation, the Ohio Department of Taxation. There are taxes all over the place in the state of Ohio. Property taxes is just one of the different types of taxation. Jeff McLean, the tax commissioner, we just hosted him at an auditor's meeting on Friday, so he was in Wood County. I had a good conversation with him, but I wanted to list some of the different types of taxes you see. Income tax is a very large source of Ohio tax dollars at $8.8 billion. Estate tax, $1.1 million. That has actually been phased out in the state of Ohio since 2011, so it's only deaths that occurred prior to that that are still paying estate tax. And that was an auditor's responsibility to distribute that tax. Commercial activity tax replaced personal property tax. Personal property tax was also administered by county auditors. That was tax on business fixtures and business assets. And then what replaced it was this commercial activity tax, or CAT tax, some people refer to it as. And that's going to be on gross receipts in excess of $150,000 are the people that have to file for that. Sales tax is another figure on there, sales and use tax. Sales tax in the state of Ohio is $10.3 billion, with $2.5 billion going to the local governments. Wood County, we have a 1% sales tax. That generates a little over $20 million annually to the county. And that's part of that $2.3 billion there, the $20 million that Wood County receives. In the state of Ohio, it's 5.75% that generates that $10.3 billion. But you can see there's all kinds of different taxes on there. Gas tax is on there at $1.8 billion. That's something that's in the media right now. There's talk of increasing that from the 28 cents that it currently is to maybe an additional 18 cents. It's the last figure I heard. But you can see that's substantial. All those sources of revenue generates a 28.1, almost $28.2 billion to the state of Ohio last year. The one, also I kind of wanted to note the replacement tire fee of $8.5 million. That's $1 per tire. I just thought that was very interesting. So there's 8.5 million tires sold in Ohio last year. As far as state and local taxation, as far as the amount, we rank right pretty much in the middle. We're 25th out of the 50 states plus the District of Columbia. And you can see the average is 4,800 on an average, and Ohio ranks 25th at 4,414, with North Dakota being the highest. So I don't know the reason necessarily, but you can see we're right in the middle as far as rate of taxation. Okay, property tax. The tax that I'm most familiar with, because that's what I'm actually charged with assessing all the properties for, is Ohio's oldest tax. It's been around since 1825. In order to determine the value, county auditors are charged with conducting reappraisals every 6 years. Wood County just completed ours for tax year 17, payable in 18. So that would have been your tax bill last year. That value we set for last year carries forward to this year and then the year following. And then 3 years in between, we'd actually do an update where we'll look at values again and trend them based on sales. But I'm charged with setting the value at market value, which is the value in money. So what a motivated seller and a motivated buyer would pay for a particular property, I'm determined to try to determine that value. And then the assessed value is simply 35% of the market value. And assessed value is the value that your taxes are calculated on. So if you have a $100,000 home, that's the figure always thrown out to everybody. The assessed value of a $35,000 home is $35,000, or 35% of that. times the tax rate. The total value of Wood County, this is actually a year ago, just so I can compare to the state figure. Statewide, the assessed value was $238 billion. Wood County was at $3.26 billion, or 1.37% of that total state dollar amount. Okay, per order of the tax commissioner, 57-15-33, auditors are charged with conducting the sixth annual reappraisal, which means every 6 years. We'll look at all parcels to determine a new market value. This process is involved and all attributes of the parcel and structure are verified. We'll use aerial photography to measure sides of the home, heights, widths, dimensions. With this software, we can actually walk all the way around the parcel and see all sides of the home and verify our information before we set the value. The one drawback is we do not have the luxury of going in these homes, so we have to value all these structures from the outside. That being said, even if we did have that luxury, that would add significant costs to the reappraisal. Right now, the reappraisal is under $17 per parcel for all 75,000 parcels in the county that we set the value mark. The triennial update that occurs the third year in between reappraisals, we talked about what we look at there is a sales ratio study. So we'll take the assessed value that we have, the full market value, divided by the actual sales value, and come up with a ratio. And if it's trending where our assessed values are considerably lower than what we're seeing sales in the open market, we'll factor neighborhoods up. Or if it looks like our assessed value or our full market value is higher than what sales are, we'll actually factor by neighborhood down. And that's done every third year following a reappraisal. So you get the reappraisal, which we had in 2017. The next one of those will be 2023, but we'll have an update in 2020, and then the update following that will be 2026, if that makes any sense. Does anybody have questions on the reappraisal cycle? Out of all 88 counties in Ohio, they're all on individual cycles. Lucas County was just a year after ours. Henry County is the same cycle as we are. I think Hancock might be the same cycle as we are as well, but it's just how you fall into that cycle. Is everybody still awake? Okay. That's, what's the joke is the auditor goes home and his wife says, honey, tell me something great about your day. And he starts talking, telling her all these things, and he looks over and she's already asleep, you know. So that's what we got. But, well, from that reappraisal, all those values are summed together, and that gives us a tax base for Wood County. We've got two different classes of taxpayers. We've got Class 1 taxpayers, which is going to be made up of the agricultural and residential taxpayers. And you can see the values of those two classes and then the percentages of the total. And then Class 2 taxpayers are going to be your commercial taxpayers, industrial, commercial, real property, public utility. And then the full rate taxpayers are the personal property public utility, which is going to be your transmission lines and your pipelines, those type of things. But the pipelines are going to pay at the full rate, and you can see for this year they make up 7.1% of the tax base.
What is CAUV value?
CAUV value is current agricultural use value. Agricultural land is valued at the current agricultural use value rather than the market value. So the state does a analysis of all the different soil types in the state. There's like 3,500 different ones. Hoytville clay is like 2/3 of Wood County. The CAUV value for that right now is $3,110, where the market value, when you see farms sell, you might see them sell for $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 an acre. The taxes are based on that $3,110, and that is determined by an income approach, where they'll take yields and prices, do an income approach to value, and based on the yields and the costs and the prices that farmers are update, so every third year. So in Wood County, we just had new values set with our reappraisal for CUV. It's one of those things, it went up quite a bit in the past. We went from like $760 an acre to $1,770 to $3,900 an acre. These are all in Whiteville, back down to $3,110. So as the ag economy really boomed there late 2009, 10, and 11, there was high prices and high yields, and farmers were netting more dollars per acre, and then that calculation generated a higher CEV value. And now it's back down some as the prices have come back down. But we'll see an update in tax year 2020 on that again, but they'll calculate it once again. But that value, the auditor's charge was setting the market value, so we could set the market value of farm ground at $6,000 or $7,000 an acre, but the actual taxes are based on that CEV value once they're enrolled in that program. And what that actually provides is an acre of Whiteville that's, say, on the edge of Perrysburg that's being farmed, actively farmed, a 40-acre tract. They're going to pay on that CEV rate the same as somebody in the middle of Jackson Township outside of Whiteville, where this land's probably worth $100,000 an acre, and this land down here might only be worth $6,000 an acre, but they're both assessed evenly because of the CEV.
It's complicated.
Oh yeah, yeah, but that's what the CEV does. It provides uniformity based on soil type, and it's taxed based on the production value rather than the market value. This pie chart here shows the, and that 10.24% is the CEV value of agricultural land here. The public utility, the 7.1 is where the pipelines are stuck in there. And residential, you can see that over 60% of the tax base is made up of residential taxpayers. I'll go back to that slide real quick. Countywide, this is the tax base. Individually, a different taxing district, it's going to be maybe a different makeup. For instance, the Rossford School District has a fairly large commercial and industrial tax base, and that's why they try to rely on property taxes rather than income taxes to support their school. The school treasurer there would rather have the industry and commercial taxpayers pay rather than residential would pay in their income tax. And then Elmwood School District, on the other hand, before the CAV just came down, agriculture actually was the largest taxpayer in that district. It actually exceeded residential 2 years ago. So this is countywide makeup, but every taxing district might have something a little bit different. House Bill 920, you can read what it's kind of about there, but essentially what it does is it prevents additional money on a levy after it was voted in. So if you vote a levy in and then real estate values appreciate, it freezes the money and lowers the effective rate of the millage. So we've got some examples here. We can look at the 1.6 mil levy that was for the Adams board. So it's for you guys' board right here. There's two levies. Take this show on the road, I guess. This 1.6 mil levy voted in tax year 2015 was the first year it started. It's a 10-year levy to 2024. 1.6 mils. With the appreciation of real estate, the residential and agricultural taxpayers are paying 1.29 mils. So a little over 0.3 of a mil less than what it was voted in at. And then the commercial property taxpayers are paying 1.56, so it's factored down slightly from the full 1.6 there based on the appreciation of real estate. That's all because of the House Bill 920. It freezes the yield for that. Yes, Tom.
So the 1.6 mil levy was originally passed, the last time we had it up was a renewal. So and the renewal keeps the same value as it was originally passed 10 years prior. So you say when it was originally passed, but actually that's back
this levy first went on 14 years ago, there was enough growth to lower the 0.3 of a mil. Okay, and then public utility, personal property, we talked about the pipelines. That's going to be in this column right here. The county totals $239,000 in assessed value there. Not thousand, $1 million. They pay on the full millage, so it's unfactored millage. So to Adams Board, they're going to pay 2.6 mils based on that category. They're paying on the full class.
And what column is that?
Column, it's personal public utility.
Oh, thank you.
It starts with 239,222.
Thank you.
Yep. So that value, I should go over this. The top row is value. Res Ag at 2.4 million countywide. The other is going to be your commercial and industrial at 719 million. 3.7 million in real property public utility. That's going to pay at the other rate as well. But then the personal property public utility, 239 million is paying at the full millage. And then the yield is right underneath here. You can see Res Ag is paying 5.1 million, commercial 1.8 million, 9,500 on the real property public utility, and then 621,000 for the public utility. To total up to 7.6 million. Manufactured homes are also on there at $29,000. We do value manufactured homes, and they are taxed essentially like real estate. To total up for that estimate for Adams Board for this year is $7.6 million. Any other questions on this this grid here? Okay, like the slide prior, the House Bill 920 reduction factors are applied on carryover property we talked about, and the appreciation of those values. That can have an inverse effect if there's a depreciation in real estate. That happened in the late 2000s, where the housing market was starting to crumble, and we actually had a reduction in value on some buildings, and especially residential. And it has the inverse effect then in the real estate, the actual millage rate can actually climb then to generate the same. But ordinarily that's not the case. Normally real estate appreciates in value, but the House Bill 920 can have a reverse effect if that would ever, heaven forbid, occur again, at least while I'm out here. So, but then the important thing to keep in mind, a new construction will always increase your tax yield. You always get new dollars with new construction, because that's that actually just increases the base to a whole new level, but then you're going to take the additional dollars on that new construction. CAUV, we talked about that a little bit, current agricultural use value. I guess the main takeaway there is you can see that the statewide total CAUV value is $10 billion versus $24.6 billion at market value. So you can see the savings that program affords to farmers that are actively farming the parcels. Wood County has 9,600 parcels, totaling 317,000 acres. And last year we netted $12 million in tax savings between the full market and CAUV. There's probably no farms that are actively being farmed in Wood County that are not in the program, because the savings are pretty significant. That being said, if a farm does come out of the program, there's a 3 years recoupment that they'll pay back. They'll pay back the 3 years of tax savings at closing time. So anything that's developed, whether it's for a home or commercial business, we do recoup three years of the savings. 20 mil floor. Does anybody know what that term even is, or have they heard it before? This does not apply to the Adams Board, so I guess you can rest assured you don't have to know too much about it here. This has to do with school districts. The state says that Right now, we just have one school district that's on the 20 mil floor that had an adjustment last year. We can flip to the next screen. That was Perrysburg School District. What it looks at is all their property levies. They're all broken down here, and this is only operating money. So the bond, the emergencies, the permanent improvements, all those levies are not part of this calculation. It's only operating money. So they add up all their levies and the effective rate of all their levies, and they came to 19.96 mils. Well, it's just under 20 mils. So what the state does then, they'll adjust that to 20 mils. I mean, it's less than 400ths of a mil, but it puts them back on the 20 mil floor. And that's the adjustment that occurs, and that'll be every year they'll look at that, and any school districts that fall underneath that 20 mil floor, they'll adjust. Now, the district's not operating on just 20 mils. We can look at that here. There's the Perrysburg School District estimate of revenue. I should note too that on that last slide, the commercial property did not receive an adjustment because they're collecting 22 mils there on the commercial and industrial. It's just on the res ag rate. But here's Perrysburg School District's total estimate of revenue. But they've got all these other levies. The effective rate is 40.96 mils. So of that, 20 mils is for operating, but the other 20.96 mils is going to be for either the permanent improvement, their fixed sum levy, or their bond issues. So that's just how that calculation works on operating money. But they look at every school district statewide every year, the Department of Taxation does, and they make that adjustment to get all school districts to that 20 mil floor. Any questions on that at all?
When the state raises the rate, where's that money allocated to?
When they raise the rate, they're going to raise it on individual levies that are operating money. So it'll be general fund money for the school district, yeah. Yep, because it's just operating money, but then they'll just up a couple different levies. We didn't talk about it earlier, but the inside millage, this is marked here, inside millage, 4.3 mils. Back, I don't know, a long time ago, 10 mils was the original amount, the minimum dollar amount, minimum taxation to keep all the doors open of county government, township government, and school districts. And so any millage over the 10 mils is all voted on. So, but the 10 mils is always unfactored, so it's always value times rate. So there's no reduction factor here. 4.3 mils is Perrysburg's share, and so it's 4.3 for res ag, 4.3 for commercial. So anytime there's an increase in value, they're going to yield more money on that one. Anytime there's a decrease, they're going to yield less. But that's the House Bill 920 does not affect the inside millage at all. Of the inside millage, the county gets 2.4 mils out of the 10 mils. 2.35 goes to the general fund, and 0.05 goes to fund the historical center out at the museum there on County Hill Road. Okay, now we can talk about the pipeline's impact. Rover Pipeline overnight came in with an assessed value of $57.5 million. That became the largest single source taxpayer in Wood County, bypassing Toledo Edison, who was number one. That $57.5 million generates for this year $4.2 million in taxes countywide across all the school districts and all the entities. But for the Adams Board, it's about $150,000. That's additional. The generation pipeline that staked around the edge of Perrysburg came in this year with a value of $10.6 million in assessed value. It's a little over $1 million to the countywide, but another $27,700 to the Adams Board. And we're hopeful next year we've got the second Rover pipe. The Rover pipeline was twin 42-inch pipes in the southern part of the county. The second one's coming on to be taxable next year, as well as a 36-inch Nexus pipeline that crosses the middle part of the county. So some other substantial values coming on. Now these values are very substantial now. They will depreciate time. They got a 30-year depreciation cycle. They start at 98.3%, falling to 15% over that 30-year cycle. So over time, they'll, you know, the value will start to disintegrate over time, but they'll eventually, after 30 years, be at that 15% amount and continue to pay as long as they're operational. This is just a map I found online. This doesn't have the Rover, the Nexus, or any of those pipelines, but these are existing pipelines that are in Wood County already, all over the place, that are being taxed. You know, they're part of the public utility value. They're just now making a splash at $57 million in assessed value. But I thought that was kind of neat. Any questions on the pipelines or their impact? How are we doing on time? We're doing good? Okay. And then I thought I'd talk a little bit about qualified and unqualified levies. The levy that just passed for the Adams Board, the was a 1 mil replacement levy, is a non-qualified levy now, so it'll no longer qualify for the 10% rollback or the owner-occupied credit. Prior to 2013, all residential and agricultural properties would get a 10% tax break, reimbursed by the state of Ohio. So the entities were made whole, but it was made whole by the state of Ohio. So if you owned and lived in your own home, essentially you only paid 87.5% of the local burden, and then the rest was reimbursed by the state. Since 2013, any replacement or new millage becomes a non-qualified levy, and the state does not reimburse for those amounts anymore. So when the levy goes on next year, starts collecting, the local taxpayer will pay the full 1 mil. Nothing will be reimbursed from the state. That's a long and short of the qualified versus unqualified. We can look here at Wood County. We've got 83 different taxing districts, 402 individual levies. Of those 402, 52 are non-qualified. The Adams Board's going to have 1 non-qualified starting next year and 1 qualified. So you guys are going to have one in each category there. But to talk about what that 10% and I guess it's the non-business credit now, it's formerly the 10% because it doesn't calculate to 10% anymore because not all the levies are there, or the owner-occupied credit. Those are the totals reimbursed to Wood County, looks like last year, $14.5 million. So you can see it's substantial to keep levies in the qualified status if you can. We always encourage anybody, if they can, to keep renewing as long as you can until you have to replace, or keep renewing and maybe add additional millage, that type of thing. I think the most recent example of something like that was the Board of DD just did a renewal with a reduction, but that levy wasn't qualified anyway, so I guess that was a non-qualified levy anyway. But there's all kinds of different ballot language in this and that, but the qualified and unqualified, that doesn't seem to ever make the ballot language. That's not part of it, but that is a key component if you're a residential taxpayer, that a portion of that money is coming back from the state of Ohio to make up your tax burden. And then a couple other things. We talked about the highest tax rate here in Wood County is Perrysburg Township, Rossford City, Rossford School District at 89.35 mills for residential and agricultural taxpayers, and the lowest tax rate, Jackson Township, Macomb School District at 42.4 mills. That's a difference of $1,600 on a $100,000 home, you can see. So that same $100,000 home is in this one district as opposed to the other one. The tax burden is drastically different. And then just how to compute your taxes. So you take your full market value times the 35% to get your assessed value times the millage, the effective rate, and that'll give you your taxes. Now, from that, you're going to also add on special assessments if there's street lighting, all those type of assessments. CAV recoup, we get that listed down there. tax savings. That's what the homestead program does. And that money is also reimbursed by the state of Ohio. So nobody's shorting the local taxing districts anything. It's that tax actually comes back like the non-business credit and the owner occupied. A little bit about election expense. Billed back by the Board of Elections that'll come out of the settlement for the Animus Board was $5,731.13. It's good to go on the ballot when there's a lot of things on the ballot. At the same time, if you go on a special election, it can cost you a lot more. But if you could share a lot of that election expense, that's pretty cheap for a countywide election. And one other tidbit of information, went through the 53 fund, that's the Animus Fund. We just went through total expenditures for last year were $9.1 million. Then we listed your 10 highest vendors here. And the payroll vendor is just that. It's actually the payroll for the staff. So that makes the top 10 list there. Now that does not include the fringes, the OPERS, and all those types of things, but there they are. Should be hopefully some familiar names on there. I would hope anyway. But that concludes my presentation. So I don't know if I'll open the floor for any other questions or anything else that's going on.
When something's going on in the ballot, we talk about a home of, $100,000 home. But really, we're taxing assessed value.
Yes.
And how do we find the words to communicate that? Because everybody thinks they're gonna pay that percentage on a full $100,000.
The $100,000 home is always used either by the media outlets or even we'll use it as well, just as a point of reference. Some people, depending on the school district, might even use a $200,000 home if that's more typical. But the $100,000 home has a $35,000 assessed value because it's 35%, and 1 mil on 35,000 would cost you $35.
And people don't understand that
No.
because we keep saying the $100,000 value. Somehow we need words.
Words. Yeah, and I can tell you, I think there's even a bill introduced right now in the House, Ohio House, to talk about ballot language that would give, rather than dollars per thousand or dollars per cents per hundred or all this different millage terms, that will give it on a $100,000 home. So when you're in the ballot box, you'll read, this is how much it's going to cost on a $100,000 home, which frankly probably does provide some clarity, because otherwise you could base what the taxes are on a $100,000 home, and you're like, well, I know my home's $250,000, so I'm going to pay 2.5 times that. Or you don't know your home value, you mean, or?
No, it's because of the 35%.
Oh, the 35%.
That impacts that $100,000, if you're thinking your millage is this, only it's, your house isn't really, you're not paying taxes on 100,000, you're paying taxes on 65,000.
Well, 35,000 even, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when they do quote that in the paper or anywhere else, they will quote it as the tax dollars for a $100,000 home. So that 35% calculation is taken out of the window. So it is truly taxes for a $100,000 home.
Which is the point you're making.
Yeah, I think.
It misleads people.
Yeah.
Oh, it misleads people because you're saying that the millage seems small because it's really only like a third of the value.
Well, and that is what is not communicated.
Yeah, I guess I could see that. In Ohio, unfortunately, personally, I wish it was 100% assessed value, that the assessed value matched the market value. It'd be very easy to explain.
Yeah.
But it's been 35% for so long, I don't think they'll probably ever change it. If they did, they would have to pretty much take all the current villages and increase it by 3 times. Actually, no. Solomon into thirds, actually. But yeah, the confusion is definitely,
It's a market.
Yeah.
yeah. And the one thing on my website, which I guess I should almost bring it up have a tax calculator where you could put in additional millage, but you still have to know your home value. You can look it up on my website, but plug it in. But that's something that you can do. You can plug in what you have now, it'll tell you your current tax obligation, and then any additional millage you can put in there, and it will tell you